151 in a row behind Goldie's Casino.
Police got snitches running the streets, waiting for you to slip or make a mistake. Using clues and hints, also setups, use as fucking bait. They'll try to do you and try to shoot ya, even destroy your future. Try to indict you on a case, swear you a mace, leave you erased. Illegal traces on our phones and our brothers run through your pockets, socks and drawers and beat your ass in broad daylight. Don't wanna fight back because if I do, they take me downtown. They call it assault. Consider for 10 years as a result, and my life is shot like a catapult.
How they get shot? Police stations investigating, anticipating, sentencing and probation for high-speed chases, drug possession and loaded weapons, misdemeanors and felonies, the charges that we're facing. How they get ya? Snitches drop a quarter dime, police tap your line, and before you know it, you're doing time. Watch the swine, they wanna keep you in that jail line. Their fault is fought by design, it's all about the dollar.
Greetings, it's your host, Gabe Morales. I tried to get a few people to come on to talk about criminal justice reform, and I understand why a lot of people want to shy away from this subject, but I feel it's very important. This episode will examine issues concerning criminal justice reform with the subtitle, Are We Too Woke or Not Woke Enough? I'm sure it's going to upset some on the far left and far right, but I consider myself a moderate and try to look at the issues from all sides. It's unfortunate, but many times we don't listen to one another today. These issues are very complex, so there are no easy answers. Previously, we had some panels on this subject, and I'm going to play a few clips for you.
Right now, I'm going to roll this over to Chris. He's going to define for us what defunding, disbanding, or reform actually looks like and whether or not it's realistic. Chris?
Morning. I am talking to you from Seattle. I live on this boat, and sailing's a big hobby of mine. I've been a police officer for a long time, and you have to have a hobby to keep yourself sane. So definitions. Reform is what we've been doing for the past 50 years in this country. It could be laws, it could be changes in the policies of police departments and anything like that. There is obviously some debate on how well this is working. And with the George Floyd protests, defund became a thing. And that means different things to different people. Some people just think the police are doing too much, and I would tend to agree with them. Like, for example, mental health calls should be handled by mental health professionals, things like that. And some of those funds should be transferred. Seattle, there's a strong anarchist movement, and their slogan is 50%. And the activists really only want the police to kind of be like a SWAT team and respond if there's a madman on the loose. And okay, the cops can handle that, but stay out of our business. And eventually we will replace you with something new. So they want to tear it down and rebuild it back into something more suitable for the community. And the last thing is disband. And disband can mean different things to different people. If you're a bomb throwing anarchist, that means no cops whatsoever because they don't believe in government and they don't like the cops. If you're a social justice person, it could mean the model of police we have now is toxic and we need something that is more sensitive to the needs of the community. They list an example as Camden, New Jersey, where they basically fired all the police and rehired the good ones, and now they have a new police department. In my opinion, it was really just kind of a union busting measure because they had a bunch of cops they couldn't fire because they had some bad contracts, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that's an example. Minneapolis is making serious moves to do that. Seattle's talked about doing it, but they don't really have a concrete plan. And I'm the first to admit we need to do better, to do a lot better. But I think if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to get to a point where we're like a Scandinavian country where the cops hardly ever use force.
Tommy, are you ready to rock and roll?
I am ready. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go for it.
So first of all, I want to say thank you, Chris, for providing that data on what's happening here in Los Angeles. I think there is a feeling in Los Angeles that ongoing reform efforts have had some impact over the years. That's commonly those of us who've been here a long time. And I've been here long enough to be through 3 different civil unrests, Watts riots, the Rodney King now. So I'd really like to focus my comments because one of the things that I'm aware of is after the unrest and demonstrations and the stories, when that's done, these communities all have to live together. So people return to their communities, police return to those communities and work in those communities. And so when the stories aren't being told, that work still has to be done. And we all have a mutual interest. So when I think about how do I participate in the process of advancing these things. The work that I've done predominantly has been working with people who have survived their encounters with police. They've gone through due process and participated in the court, been placed on probation. And when they come to me, I help them find ways to change, to pursue career opportunities, and to make positive, productive lives that contribute to the community in a positive way. So what I wanted to do is focus on two things that I think we can agree on. And I think in each of these areas of unrest, what I heard, if I sort of put it in the synopsis, is the community wants to see things change. And there definitely are things that we can do better. I'll agree with Christopher on that. And the first one is, I just think we need to reintroduce, as our police culture and what we have them do, we need to reintroduce the idea, and this is not specifically with LA, preservation of life as a guiding principle. I think the thing that disturbs the public and some of the videos we see is we see use of lethal force in circumstances where it doesn't seem to most of us that it seems like it could have been avoided. So needless loss of life has to be elevated to the worst outcome again. And so there are circumstances where it looks like our officers are not, that didn't get done. And so, but it's not just I believe that culture is an issue, and shaping your culture so that it yields behaviors that reflect that principle is an important piece of that kind of change. So the other thing that I think is, for me, really important, and I think there's an opportunity and folks are open and considering options. I really hope that we end up looking at alternative response options. So instead of, as Christopher indicated, mental health calls, have people that are trained crisis intervention specialists, mental health professionals, social workers, and teams. And I also think I've worked with police and different teams as a social worker and as a probation officer, where we responded to different calls and we did that work together. And I think when those teams train together and they're accustomed to working together, you get the best results. I think the community gets the kind of public safety involvement from their law enforcement professionals that they want, and you get better outcomes.
Ron, you have it. Let's rock and roll.
I'd like to start saying thank you very much, because all of you took everything I had to say, and now I don't have anything left to say. So we'll start from there. I believe we have to go back to where modern policing was invented in London in the early 1800s by a guy named Sir Robert Peel. And the thing that has always resonated with me is one of his quotes is that the police are with the people and the people are the police. When it got to the United States, something changed. Now, the United States was originally all agrarian, and then it has become heavily urban, only within the last 10 years, predominantly urban. Policing, or from the sheriffs, is basically, as my belief, has been something for us to keep those kind of people in their place to protect our kind of people. In New York and Chicago in the early 1900s and up to the middle of the 20th century, it was first either to keep the Italians and the Irish in their place. Then in Chicago, it was to keep the Slovaks and the Italians in their place. But from the 40s, it has been keep the blacks in their place. In Los Angeles, in 1920, the Los Angeles Times, the Realtor Association, and the LAPD cut a deal. Keep the blacks west of Holmes, east of Crenshaw, south of the 10, and you can do anything you want with them. Just make sure they don't go beyond that. Policing nationally has been basically a racist institution to keep people in their place. Now, you can't blame that all on the police, because the police reflect those who hire them and tell them what to do. As simply a reflection of the society. If you were to do the things that police in South LA and East LA do, or in West Chicago or South Chicago do in some of the more la-di-da parts of Chicago or LA, there'd be hell to pay on the departments. The violence in LA did have a precipitous drop in the last 20 years, predominantly because of the LAPD, the city leadership teamed up with intervention workers, all of whom were ex-convicts. And that's when the precipitous drop in violence in the Black and brown areas that are the poorest took place. Last chief and the present chief have both given enormous credit to intervention workers, and it is the belief of intervention that police are only part of an overall process that must be accepted in order to change violence. Now, how do we change this? I don't believe reform will change it, because reform primarily is something that's given to the police to do to themselves, because the dominant society and the elected officials don't want to touch this because they don't want to be seen as being weak on crime. And so they give it to the police to reform themselves. That's difficult to do.
This is the police culture that we've developed right now. This culture has become the us versus them culture because so much negativity has come in on us for being that way, that's what's causing a problem with our community relations. And we have these cops who now have become so sequestered in, and they're so hyper vigilant, it's leading to massive burnout. And people are burning out way faster than they should be. We shouldn't have cops after 5 years. I'm done. I'm getting out of this. It's too much. It's because of that. It's because we're been trained and we've been fed to believe that we have to be constantly on duty. The thing is, we don't need cops to be on duty all the time. If there's an incident that's happening, it's okay to just be a good witness. You don't have to pull your gun and be involved with the takedown. You could just, if there's so much value in a good witness who can articulate what they saw and what happened and who the bad guy was. We'll get the bad guy. We'll get him. If we don't get him right that minute, that's okay. And so we don't think of it that way. We think of, well, I'm there. If I don't do something now, then I'm going to be the bad guy and I'm going to be guilty for the rest of my life for not doing something right then. Now, and I say that in general terms. If you have a shooting that's happening and you're there and can take care of it, that's totally different. I'm just talking about regular going to dinner with your wife and things like that, because along with this burnout is we're losing officers hand over fist. They're leaving in droves. I know now they're starting to pick up on hiring again, but it's because of this. It's this police culture that we have. It's this machismo. You know, everyone's got the grunt style shirts on with the flags on the shoulders and they're too tight and they want to show, you know what I'm saying?
Decals on their trucks, the back of their trucks and everything. Yeah.
Everyone's got the flags on their hats, and you know, I'm all about being patriotic. I'm very patriotic.
Almost an under siege mentality.
Yes, we're not at war. We are not at war with the public, and that's today's with the tack vests that people are wearing. I mean, we look like we have combat soldiers going into, my kid's out of control call. We don't need to be policing that way. We're overdoing it. We're over policing our own communities.
Now, I've heard some criticize these individuals, saying that they produced no solutions for improving the system. However, the Department of Justice, as I've said many times, has legally been put in charge of overseeing reforms in many police agencies. And this has not gone over too well for a variety of reasons. For one, you have some in the community that are very anti-police. And for another reason, you have many police unions who really don't want to see any reform. So you have two opposing sides, basically, that cannot reach compromise. And on one side, you have police, both active and former police officials, who believe that the Department of Justice has no business overseeing police departments. Many of these individuals say they have zero tolerance for police misconduct. However, for decades now, police have had internal affairs investigate their own, and very seldom has that produced major differences in officer behaviors unless they commit a violent felony. Many times their jobs are saved, or they still are able to work in another agency. This includes officers involved in past excessive force accusations. Many times individuals who are involved on committees for police reform are very biased. There is no doubt about that. Many of them have had loved ones that were killed or shot or involved in police use of force. And so they are highly emotional individuals given those experiences. I've also recently heard a lot of officers talk about they are not woke and they are not going to give any ear to anybody who is about wokeness. This kind of confuses me because I always thought that being woke means being aware, being awake. But it's come to be a bad term, obviously, by some police officers and definitely on the far right. I know that language evolves. For instance, I remember growing up when people would use the term bad, that means it was good. It was really nice. It is interesting to me that in 2017, the word woke made Merriam-Webster's dictionary and described it as chiefly being U.S. slang and defined the word as aware and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. So I'm puzzled here. Does that mean because I'm aware there is such a thing as race discrimination, in spite of some people saying that it's totally gone away and that that's old news? And that even though I worked in criminal justice all my life, much of that time as an officer in uniform, that I'm not supposed to care about social justice? I thought in the Pledge of Allegiance it says, and justice for all. I don't think we're there yet. I think we have improved a lot, but we still have a ways to go. When I think of woke, I think of marginalized communities. And I'm not trying to play victim's advocate here, because I know there are some people who will play the race card, especially when it is convenient for them. But there are people who have had wrong done to them of all colors. When I hear people say that they're against wokeness, I hear them saying they're against black and brown people. That's what it sounds like, even if that's not what they really mean. So I think people need to be careful. We all do when we say things. It depends on the context, but it can be misinterpreted. I think you would agree. Now, I do understand that the word woke became more popular with the Black Lives Matter movement. You should know that there are some things about Black Lives Matter that I believe are legitimate, but I also believe that there are a lot of people involved with that organization that are very anti-police. For instance, I have major issues with the narrative that some people have made in the Michael Brown case. I'll have to get into that another time, and how I believe Ferguson was really excused for a lot of people just to loot and burn in the year 2014 and in the past 10 years since. I've also heard some people talk about the woke police. There's no such thing as woke police. There is such a thing as the police. And by no means do I believe that most of them are racist. In fact, I believe the exact opposite. The vast majority, I'd say 90% or more in most cases, are good or fair officers that just want to do their job and do so according to regulations or standard operational procedures. But these don't make the 6 o'clock news. It's only the ones that use excessive force or the corrupt ones. And so that concludes my video. Are we too woke or not woke enough? For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off. Gangsters, cops, and politicians.
Run your pockets, socks and drawers, and beat your ass in broad daylight. Don't wanna fight back, because if I do, they take me downtown, they call it assault. Consider for 10 years as a result, then my life is shot like a catapult.
How they get shot, police stations investigating, anticipating, sentencing and probation for high-speed chases, drug possession and loaded weapons, misdemeanors and felonies, the charges that we're facing. How they get shot, snitches drop a quarter dime, police tap your line, and before you know it, you're doing time. Watch the swine, they wanna keep you in that jail line. Their fault is fucked by design, it's all about the dog.